Hello, everybody. My name is Shariq Haseen, and I'm from the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at UT Arlington. I work with Dr. Peter Kroll. So today I'm going to talk about the elastic properties of amorphous SiCO or silicon oxycarbide ceramics. For a brief background, silicon oxycarbide ceramics are a subset of polymer-derived ceramics, which are advanced ceramics that exhibit many desirable properties, and they've already been commercialized in a number of different ways. Anyway, in the final step of the polymer to ceramic conversion process, if pyrolysis temperatures between 1100 and 1600 Kelvin are used, along with an excess of carbon, then the resulting ceramic is best described as a mixture of amorphous glass-like SiCO plus a free carbon phase. And this free carbon phase has found to be graphite-like, and at higher pyrolysis temperatures is even turbostratic. Now, there's a difficulty in determining structural features of amorphous materials experimentally, so we use computations. Of course, we are also motivated by a study in 2019 by the Sararu group, which found that increasing the free carbon content in SiCO results in a decrease in the Young's modulus and hardness. Incidentally, experimental values also supported a rule of mixture in which the properties of SiCO can be estimated by taking a weighted average of its components, like silica or silicon carbide, and using the volume fraction. Anyways, the issue with the 2019 study was that the sample density was not controlled for. So samples with high amounts of free carbon also had lower densities. And so we looked to investigate the relationship between density and elastic property, along with the relationship between free carbon content and elastic properties. Our procedure is pretty straightforward. We generate tons of SiCO models using molecular dynamics simulations. The key of our simulation is that we heat up to a maximum temperature, or Tmax, and then we cool down to 300 Kelvin. And so we look at different chemical compositions of the SiCO glass, different Tmaxes and densities. We quantify the free carbon content by using a free carbon to silicon ratio, or N, where a higher value of N refers to a higher amount of free carbon. And then we generate 3 independent models for each combination of parameters, where models are between 25,000 to 50,000 atoms. During our molecular dynamics simulations, we use the Tersoff potential to describe interactions. The Tersoff potential is a semi-empirical many-body potential that essentially describes the bonding between atoms based on the local environment. We don't use carbon-oxygen attractions in this potential, as XPS studies indicate there are no carbon-oxygen bonds. Now, while the Tersoff potential does produce models that are rather bad, or the glassy matrix especially has poor local coordination, since parameters are fit to elastic properties in the first place, at least elastic properties produced by the Tersoff potential agree with experiment. So we calculate elastic properties through scripts written by Aidan Thompson from Sandia National Labs. These are dynamic simulations that calculate elastic constants, and then these elastic constants are then used to find the shear modulus and the Young's modulus through the Foyt-Royce-Hill approximation. When we look at the impact of density, we, of course, make sure that no other factors are changed. We use the same composition, the same Tmax of model generation. So as you can see, when we calculate then the shear modulus, which is the G and the y-axis on the left, and the Young's modulus, which is on the y-axis on the right figure, versus density, we can see immediately that increasing the density results in an increase of shear modulus and Young's modulus. And this is true for all of the different compositions of the glass that we look at. When we do look at the impact of the composition of the SiCO glass on elastic properties, we now look at shear modulus and Young's modulus versus a simulation temperature. So essentially, we find that both shear modulus and Young's modulus decrease with increasing simulation temperature. In this case, the SiCO glass that has the highest elastic properties, or the Si2CO2, has the highest mole content of silicon carbide, whereas SiO2, or just silica, has no silicon carbide and has the lowest elastic properties. Then when we take a look at the impact of the free carbon content, again, in this case, the density and the density is held constant along with the Tmax of model generation. The only thing that is changed is the ratio of free carbon to silicon, or N. So calculation of elastic properties indicates that increasing the free carbon content results in an increase of shear modulus and Young's modulus. Essentially, the free carbon content is correlated to elastic properties and thus is not going to result in a decrease. So that answers the question based on our calculations that we predict that free carbon content increasing wouldn't decrease elastic properties. Essentially, it is likely that the Young's modulus decreased in Sararu's 2019 article or study because it's a density-driven process. Since the density of samples decreased with increasing free carbon content, it is possible that the Young's modulus decreased in that due to that reason. Anyways, when we move on to how we can generate structures with different carbon morphology, it is all about changing the Tmax, or the maximum temperature used for model generation. So here we see two structures that seem similar. One of them is generated at a Tmax of 2000 Kelvin and the other is generated at a Tmax of 4000 Kelvin. Now the 2000 Kelvin structure is actually slightly different than the carbon morphology is different in the structure on the left than on the right. When we take a close-up look, it has less six-membered carbon rings and doesn't even have a kind of network that the structure on the right exhibits. This difference in the carbon morphology is even more pronounced at higher Tmax values. So when we look at a Tmax of 6000 Kelvin, our carbon structure is an interconnected tubular network. And then at 8000 Kelvin, the carbon segregation is even higher. And now we have this much thicker tubular network. So essentially, increasing the Tmax leads to an increased segregation of the carbon. Now, when we calculate the elastic properties of these structures that only differ in the structure of the free carbon phase primarily, meaning the composition of these models are the same, the density of these models are the same, and again, they only differ in the morphology of the free carbon phase. Well, we find that increasing the Tmax value results in an increase in the elastic properties. Essentially, models with lower free carbon content do not see as much of an increase, but models with higher free carbon content do see that increase, do see a much larger increase. So anyways, these increases can be up to 20% of a change in properties. Thus, there really should not be an ideal rule of mixture, in this case, to describe elastic properties, as the structure of the carbon phase is very important and not just the volume fraction of the carbon phase. So in summary, we find that density and free carbon content are proportional to elastic properties. Increasing density or increasing free carbon content by themselves shall increase the values of the elastic properties. Additionally, we see that manipulating Tmax or choosing different values of Tmax results in carbon structures that can vary quite a bit, from dispersed carbon phases, as we see in some models, to highly segregated tubular networks for models with higher Tmax. And of course, models with different free carbon morphology also end up with different elastic properties. So really, we cannot apply any ideal rule of mixing in this case. So I'd like to thank the Kroll Research Group, along with the PIRE project and the NSF for funding. And I'd also like to acknowledge computing resources that we utilize from the Texas Advanced Computing Center and the UTA High Performance Computing Center. Thank you very much.